The evidence will show, ladies and gentlemen, that Steve Pankey did not know and had never met anyone in the Matthews family, including Jonelle.
What you will hear over and over and over again, ladies and gentlemen, is the type of evidence older than time itself. Statements. Statements and behaviors that will lead you to but one conclusion: that he is the individual we have been looking for 37 years.
Steve Pankey is now at the center of a decades-old cold case, accused of the 1984 murder of Jonelle Matthews. If convicted, he faces life in prison. The state argues that Pankey's own statements in the wake of the murder point to guilt.
It sounds to me like you are saying here that you were in the Matthews home at the time Jonelle disappeared. So is that what you're saying?
No, it was just me trying to be a big man, be in the case, okay? I had no knowledge.
The jury had to decide, is Steve Pankey a guy that just keeps inserting himself and is just a big old liar and has nothing to do with the disappearance and murder of Jonelle Matthews, or is he actually the person that did it?
Steve Pankey was a devoutly Christian individual, almost to the point of being flamboyant about his religious beliefs.
And I did become a member of Sunnyview Church, Church of the Nazarene, yeah.
Okay. You were asked to leave the church in 1977, and did that in fact occur?
Yes.
Okay.
Steve Pankey was excommunicated from this church because of his odd behaviors, verbally violent outbursts.
After he got kicked out, he would still drive by this church.
And then the Matthews family joined the church shortly thereafter.
Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in one horse open sleigh.
On December 20th, 1984, Jonelle's sister had a basketball game, and Jonelle had a choir concert scheduled at the same time.
Her mother was out of town visiting her sick parents in California, and Jim Matthews was kind of a sports fan, and so he chose to go to the basketball game.
After the concert, she was being driven home by Russ Ross, who also went to the same church that Steve used to be a part of. And her friend was in the car as well. They dropped her off that evening at home.
They watched her go into the house and turn on the light. They knew she was okay. At that point, they drove away.
And Jonelle was never seen again.
This was about 8:30 in the evening on the night of December 20th. Her father gets home at about 9:30, so we have a 1-hour window.
When Jim Matthews got home, there was nothing disturbed. It looked like she had been in the house.
But out in the yard, there are shoe prints in the snow along the windows, but also rake marks obliterating the shoe prints.
That certainly led them to believe that this was not a runaway, but an abduction. Somebody had gone to the house and taken her. Steve Pankey was not on anybody's radar at all in December of 1984. Then all of a sudden, in early 1985, he comes in and he says he has information. I think police initially thought that he was just some kook, but a lot of disappearances have people who want to infuse themselves. They love the attention. So they just blew him off. Okay, Steve, we hear what you're saying. And they started looking for the better suspect.
Then, nearly 30 years later, investigators get the break they've been waiting for.
On July 20th, 2019, oil field workers uncovered a shallow grave that had the remains of a small female. Based on the clothing, the visible braces on the teeth, the investigators knew that it was Jonelle's body. That changed the case from a missing person case to a homicide.
Law enforcement decided to start looking more deeply into Steve Pankey's internet history. And once they did, they found him obsessively Googling this case.
But the most important piece of evidence was this statement that Steve made in the 1980s.
Steve Pankey was aware that the shoe prints had been raked out.
Steve brought up the footprints fairly early to the police.
Before you talked to Detective Lockwood, did you know about the raked footprints in the snow?
I had never heard that before Mark Lockwood told me.
But Steve Pankey is a liar. And that little tidbit was something that law enforcement deliberately did not share with the media.
This indicates that Steve may have had knowledge of the crime scene that only a person involved with Jonelle's disappearance could have.
Steve was arrested in October of 2020.
Steve Pankey's defense team delivered a strong alternate suspect in his murder trial. But the prosecution has the defendant's ex-wife, Angela Hicks, who will recount what happened after the night of Jonelle's disappearance.
Steve's dad and mom had invited us to Big Bear for Christmas, but there was no plan to go.
Describe what happens on December 21st at your house.
Steve came home and he said, "Get us ready to go. We're leaving before daylight tomorrow morning to go to Big Bear for Christmas." I was just shocked because the last thing I had understood was that we weren't going.
So he asked you to turn on the radio on the way home.
So we, in my flipping around, came to a portion of a news report that had indicated that a girl had gone missing from Greeley, Colorado.
So this was specifically about Jonelle Matthews.
Yes.
What happens when you get back to Greeley?
He drives us to the Safeway store, parks, and tells me to go get the Greeley Tribune and the Denver Post. So I took those back to the car. And he asked me to read him the article about Jonelle Matthews, and I recall him having me read each one at least 3 times.
Steve Pankey is about to take the stand in his own murder trial. But Panky is unpredictable, to say the least, and his team was understandably concerned about what he might say.
In the little jail cubicle before coming up here, I was praying and I was thinking, God, maybe I shouldn't testify at all because I'd be just telling more lies. So the truth is that I made a lot of stuff up out of bitterness, and because I hated the police, it was a polite way of flipping them the bird.
But what about the incriminating comments his ex-wife Angela recounted about Jonelle's disappearance?
In December of 1984, Mr. Pankey, did you have plans to travel to Big Bear, California?
Yes.
So this was not a sudden impulse decision to go to California then, is that right?
No, this was planned.
So did you tell Angela that you couldn't have hurt Jonelle Matthews because she looked just like her?
No.
All right, so what do you recall then about the night of December 20th, 1984?
We were going to go to bed earlier because we were going to get up to head to Big Bear Lake, California. On the way home, there came a news report on the radio that there was a missing 13-year-old girl in Greeley, Colorado. That's the first time I heard that there was a missing child.
So I guess I just need you to explain, why should the jury believe that?
I have always clearly stated that from December 20th to December 26th, I didn't know who the Matthews were.
So, ladies and gentlemen, realize the jury was unable to reach a verdict. Your duties as jurors in this case are discharged with the thanks of the court.
Steve was found guilty on the charge of false reporting and sentenced to 6 months in prison. And although the jury was hung on the murder charge, that did not necessarily mean that they were out of options. Ultimately, the state decided to retry the case. And almost a year later, it went to trial. But this time, there was one significant change.
In the second trial, Steve decided to not take the stand.
And one very different outcome.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Steve and Dana Panky, guilty of murder in the first degree.
Receiving the guilty verdict today marks the end of our earthly justice journey for Jonelle, but it's only the beginning of your journey of the accountability of the death of my sister. And there is one more day of accountability still yet to come. Only you and your God will be present for that.